Jason Tiemann is a highly regarded jazz drummer based in New York City, known for his crisp technique, deep historical knowledge, and intuitive swing. Influenced by legends like Philly Joe Jones, Tony Williams, and Elvin Jones, he's forged a distinct voice on the scene, performing with artists such as Benny Golson, Dave Liebman, and Harold Mabern. He serves on the jazz faculty at the Jackie McLean Institute of Jazz and has been a longtime clinician at the Jamey Aebersold Summer Jazz Workshops. Tiemann proudly endorses Yamaha drums, Remo drumheads, and innovative percussion sticks and brushes. And we're live. So thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I was fortunate enough to get to hear you play maybe about 2 weeks ago at Mesro with Neil Miner and Chris Byers. That was, sounded beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, that's quite a fun project to be involved with. It's all of Neil's music. He's written a 20 or 30, well, I don't know how many he has in his catalog, but I think the trio with me, him, and Chris Byers have been playing together for a little over 2 years now exclusively, and we've memorized a lot of his music, and it's just fun to be a part of that project. Neil's, of course, a great musician. He's played with everybody, and his writing definitely doesn't take a backseat to his playing.
Yeah, and you seem to be having such a fun time when I was watching you play. You seem just so happy and animated, and just with the feel, it's like, is that where you feel the happiest behind the drum set?
Yeah, I mean, I feel happiest when I'm supporting other musicians. I do lead a lot of gigs as a leader, quartets, trios, and such. But uh, even when I'm doing that, my role as an accompanist is always at the forefront, and that's where I find my joy is just supporting others and kind of being invisible, so to speak.
Yeah, I started hearing your name about 10 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. Were you in Kentucky for a little bit?
Right. I lived in Louisville, Kentucky for about 15 years before my family and I moved to New York. And before that, I had been all over the place. I had been in Western Kentucky. I was actually born in Tampa, Florida, and I spent the first leg of my life there. And then my family moved to Louisville in the early 80s. And then my dad was into church music. So he studied, got a degree in church music or a master's degree in church music after an undergrad. And we ended up in Western Kentucky, which is another important part of my musical development. Um, I should say that, my dad came out of the Vietnam era, where graduating from high school, a lot of men in his age range didn't get a chance to go immediately to college. So somehow he found out he was going to be drafted, and his mother insisted that he go enlist in the Air Force. So his collegiate career was put on hold for many years. He ended up being an industrial welder for years when we were in Tampa. My mother was uh, the head secretary of the FBI in Tampa, and she also happened to be the church pianist. And so while I was in her womb, I was hearing music from a very early age. Fast forward into my earliest years of that I remember, being 4, 5, 6 years old. My dad uh, did his undergraduate in music performance at the University of South Florida, and consequently, me, my brother, and sister, would end up at student recitals. We would be sitting in music theory classes. So, like, I was absorbing all of this information, not only from him being in school, but my mother playing piano in church, and she ended up stopping doing the FBI gig and started doing private piano instruction and built a huge studio and was very, very, it was a formative part of my life that it's taken me, I'm now 51, but it's taken me all this time to realize how important that early, all of that absorption really helped.
So
And
you said that you got to New York, what, about 10 years ago, you said?
yeah, we moved in 2013, 12
Okay, so
years. Yeah.
so you've been in New York probably from all of age 40 to 50.
Yep.
And before that, you were in Kentucky for about, 15 years. You said
Yeah.
so
We,
25 to 40. Now, I think you're in a unique position because a lot of people will go to school when they're like 18 to 21, then go right to New York or go right after their masters when they're 25. But you went to New York when you were 40. And it always seemed to me that once you got here, you were working such a tremendous amount. And my question is, did you feel like you were coming at the perfect point at your age, or that was it that you feel like, oh, I should have been here for a little bit longer? Talk to me a little bit about that transition, because it is a unique position.
Yeah, yeah, of course, I always wonder what would have happened if I had gotten here when I was 25 years old. I don't know that I would have necessarily been prepared for it, musically speaking. And that brings me back to Kentucky. And when I first moved to Louisville in 1997 was the year my wife and I got married. I started doing sessions at Jamey Aebersold's house, who is, for those of you out there who don't know, is kind of a pioneer of the jazz play along. And after a couple of sessions, he asked me one day, and this is right after I finished my studies at the University of Kentucky in classical percussion. I didn't study jazz at all. And I started doing these sessions at his house. He called me one day and he said, I'd be interested in having you come and teach my camp. Would you feel comfortable, speaking ideas into these kids' ears? And that. So, anyways, I accepted the gig. I didn't have really a whole lot of educational background, but I will say that there were a lot of New York musicians who were coming to teach the camp. A few of which would have been Steve Davis, the trombone player, David Hazeltine, Rufus Reed, Eric Alexander, Jim Rotundi, Scott Winholt, Rich Perry, a whole host of guys that I got to spend over 20 years every summer developing relationships with and learning from them. So that was my real education in terms of jazz. And so naturally, when I got to New York, I knew a lot of people. And right off the bat, I was able to go into, smoke and play, sit in with Mike Ladon's organ trio, at the suggestion of Eric Alexander, who put me in touch with Joe Farnsworth, who I had only met a few times. And Joe really got me going because he would just start throwing me all of his sloppy seconds or whatever he couldn't do, or he'd gotten himself doubly committed or whatever. And so, I remember one of the first gigs that I had, Joe called me one day. He said, I need you to sub for me over at Fat Cat, which is now Cellar Dog. And I walked in and it was Harold Mabern and Dwayne Burno. And I was like, oh boy, I've just walked into the wrong gig. But it was great. And both Harold and Dwayne were so supportive. And that's how the ball just kind of started just like you meet one more person here and there, and then it just kind of grew. And I already knew a lot of people. So naturally, I knew a lot of the One for All music, which is the band that was Jim Rotundi, Eric Alexander, Steve Davis, Hazeltine, and John Weber. When they would come teach the camps, I just preemptively learned all of the music from all of the recordings. And then we would go up to Indianapolis and play at the Jazz Kitchen, or we'd go to the Blue Wisp in Cincinnati and play. So we had pretty good relationship developed, at that point. So that is kind of I wouldn't say it's a lucky story, but I think that because of that, paying those dues at that time that I was in Kentucky, that paved the road for me to kind of get my foot on the ground here in New York.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I also, I used to go to Lexington and to play and closer to Ohio, to the Midwest, and there's amazing musicians, everywhere you go. And when you were in Kentucky, were you longing for more musically, or just happened to be that it was just the right thing that happened at the right time? My question basically is, would you have been musically as fulfilled, if you had stayed there, you think?
Well, I think that, everybody always said, if you want to really play the music at the highest level, you got to go where the fire is. And the fire is what everybody always says is New York. That's where there is the most concentration of any instrument, and everybody can play. And down there were some exceptional musicians between Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Chicago, Louisville, Nashville. That was my little circle that I would play in. Because Cincinnati was only an hour and a half away from Louisville. Indianapolis was 2 hours away. So there were guys up there like Steve Ali, this piano player who's been playing with Rufus Reed for many years. Guys like Steve Schmidt in Cincinnati, Phil DeGreg, great piano players that really kind of took me under their wing. And then I played quite a bit in Louisville with a piano player who had a lot of experience. He was a piano player by the name of Harry Pickens, who played in the Blue Note band. It was a Blue Note Young Lions band back in the 80s called Out of the Blue. I don't know if you've heard of that project or whatever, but he was also playing with Johnny Griffin and touring all the time and playing with some really heavies. Anyways, he moved back to Louisville, and he was the first person that really gave me my bebop schooling. So to answer your question, yes, there were a lot of really great musicians and I was getting a lot of great experiences, but I wanted to just step my foot in deeper and see if I could see how it would go. You know, I mean, there was always this, after the camps would end in the summers and all the New York guys would go back, my heart was there. Like, I mean, I wanted to play with those guys and I wanted to play at that level. And my wife kept saying year after year, why don't we just go? And of course, at the time we had 3 young children, and the idea of moving a family of 5 up to New York and, you know, downsizing our, you know, we had a massive house with a 2.5 car garage. And so we were talking about moving into 700 square feet and selling all of our junk and everything. Anyways, it was perfect. I mean, yeah. So I hope I answered that question.
No, I think it's such a great story. It's very interesting. Imagine if like you stayed in, you know, you're in the Midwest for 15, you're in New York for 15, then you went to LA for 15 or Texas, you know, it'd be funny if that, but I don't think that'll be the case, you know. Just plant your foot
I,
everywhere for
I
15
think
years.
I think if I go anywhere else, it's just going to be to the desert and just live in an RV or something.
Yeah. No, this is great stuff. I I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about the Jackie McLean Institute. The university system is changing drastically. For instance, like the college I teach at, the arts department, is closing in 2 years, but somewhere like the Jackie McLean Institute that really has the jazz major is something that I'm sure will be around for a very long time. It's one of the most important schools in jazz, you know, just as important as Berkeley or MSM or Juilliard. When it comes to teaching, how did that opportunity come to be? And what exactly are you teaching? Or is it just drums or is it ensembles? Talk a
Well,
little bit about that.
let me slow you down a little bit. 2 years ago, I decided I was not teaching there anymore. So I'm no longer at the Jackie McLean School.
Okay.
I was there for 7 years uh, prior to my deciding to just. It was like a 2.5 hour drive one way, and like, you know, the class load changed every semester. I was primarily teaching applied jazz drum set lessons, and then occasionally I would go and either sub for somebody in a combo, like if Steve had to leave or whatever, I might take over his combo for the day or whatever. But yeah, it was primarily just working hands on with the individual students. And prior to that, and how it came about that I ended up at the Hard School was that when I lived in Louisville, I was doing the same position at the University of Louisville, which was known as the Jamey Aebersold School of Jazz or whatever. I can't even remember what the official name was. But the spring semester, right before we moved, Javon Jackson came down and did a residency with our students, and he had already taken over at the Jackie McLean Institute, and we hit it off. We played a concert for everybody. We had a nice exchange, and he was very gracious and kind to me. And when I got to New York, he got me on some gigs with Les McCann, and I played a weekend at Smoke with him. And about a year later, maybe 2 years, he called me out of the blue one day because the attendance had boomed at the Hart School and they needed more help. So he said, he asked me if I wanted to come aboard, and it just kind of fell in my lap.
Yeah, that's
I
great.
wasn't seeking another college teaching gig. I mean, at this point, I've done probably 25 years in the classroom. I mean, I almost feel like I should be retired, but you
Well, no,
know,
I think this is you were just saying it was something that it was part of your life, and now it's just, you never know, it might happen again, right? If the
yeah, and
position.
it's all about, yes, absolutely, it could happen, and I would never say no. Like a lot of times, I'll sub for Tim Armacost out at Queens College and run his combo for, you know, when he's out in Europe or wherever he goes, and So the door is open. I think I would probably be a little bit more selective about it, in the future, and not get myself overextended, because you got to remember, when I was doing the Hart School, like that 5 hour round trip drive
Oh, that'll kill you.
would,
That'll burn you
yeah.
out.
And I would go up there and I would teach 8 students just back to back. I mean, I wouldn't even take a lunch break.
It
I would
takes
just
like
like pack.
2 days to recover from that.
Yeah. And I wanted to be more on the playing scene, not so much in the educational realm. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I still do
Sure.
teach a lot of private students, but it would dictate whether I took a gig either the night before or the night after that day. And I didn't want that restriction anymore.
No, it makes total sense. Two things I want to say. You seem like a really nice person, so we should send like a lot of the New York people over to Kentucky to get their mindset together. Because just you seem like a very positive person. Like you'll play with whoever's,
Well,
if
that's the
the
thing.
opportunity.
I'm a chameleon, man. Like,
Yeah,
that's the thing is that, uh, I mean, there are three factors that I tend to use to validate whether or not I want to play the gig. Either the money's got to be okay. There's the money, there's the music, and the hang, and two of those things have to be in place. If it's just one, I mean, unless it's just an insane amount of money, and the hang is just going to be horrible, and the music's going to be so
well,
so.
let's say it's like $5,000, but they're like not very good musicians, and it's only an hour.
That's what I'm saying. Like, okay, all right, I would probably do it, but if I had to choose between a lesser paying gig and quality music and a great hang, I would almost go with the lesser paying gig any day of the week, you
Yeah.
know.
No, that this is great. Let's talk a little bit about some of the people you played with. I mean, I listed some of them, but I like to talk to you a little bit about working with Benny Golson when you got to play with him. He's no longer here, rest his soul. So and to get to play with him, one of the masters and the music and composition. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it was a monumental experience for me for sure. I played with him a total of probably 3 different weekends, and they were all in the Midwest, all at the Jazz Kitchen. Actually, there was one time that I played with him that I don't even count as a real playing experience. That was with a National Endowment for the Arts thing that they had bassist Richard Davis come to the University of Kentucky and do a series of master classes over like 6 months, and he would bring a guest with him. So one time he brought Sir Roland Hanna. I got to play a little bit with him. One time he brought Benny Golson, and Benny was a sweetheart, and he was nothing but like sunshine. I mean, he was very complimentary about some of the things that I was doing, and he kind of edged me with his elbow, and he says, "We'll slip you in somewhere." And then next thing I know, he's coming up to the Jazz Kitchen in Indianapolis, and so I got to play a weekend with him there, and then that happened subsequently, not too long before I left Louisville and came up here. And in terms of playing with him, probably the biggest thing that I learned was, one thing that he said, he didn't really rehearse a lot. I mean, we came in and we did our sound check, and he told us what tunes we were going to do. And like, of course, we were going to do all the hits like Stablemates, and I Remember Clifford, and Horizon Ahead, which is one of his newer compositions. Along Came Betty. But he said, he turned around and he says, whatever happens, if something goes terribly wrong, don't look around like something's going wrong. You just kind of fake it until you make it, because if you give it away, everybody will know something went wrong.
Ah,
So that was the thing probably the biggest thing, other than the fact that he was just an absolute sweetheart and a joy to play with and be around and hear his stories. And I don't know, did you ever get to see him live?
yes, I did.
So you probably saw a very similar
He talked a lot about the
presentation.
history of the songs and the bands and stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So it's a lot of that. I can't remember if we played all the same tunes both times or not, but anyways, that's in a nutshell. That was my experience with Benny.
Yeah, I mean that's great. Do you go back to the Midwest to play and connect with old musicians you used to work with from time to
Not
time?
as occasionally. I mean, usually the way that'll work is if somebody has something that's substantial enough that I can build a couple of things around it. That's helpful. I did just go out on tour a couple of weeks ago. Did a whole Midwest tour with Jim Snydero, the alto saxophone
Yeah.
player, and Peter Washington on bass. So I think we did 12 gigs in 12 days. It was just like different city every day. And we played. So I got to see a lot of the old musicians that, in fact, when we played at the Jazz Kitchen in Indianapolis, the pianist that I mentioned earlier, Steve Ali, joined us for that one date. And I've got another one coming up towards the end of June with an old friend of mine that a Hammond organ player, Steve Snyder's his name, and he's got a recording that we're going to do, and then he booked a whole bunch of gigs around it. So yeah, occasionally it does happen, not as often, maybe twice a year,
Yeah.
or sometimes I might go down and I might do a masterclass tour on my own. So like I'll hit the University of Louisville where I used to teach. I'll hit the University of Kentucky where I went to school. I'll do one at Indiana University in Bloomington. I'll do one at Cincinnati Conservatory, Murray State University, just like make a whole tour out of it and try to, plug some gigs in there and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I also want, before we wrap up, I'd like to talk to you about dynamics and when it comes to playing the drums. Because when I saw you play, I saw you play at Mesro, which is it's a smaller room and everything. So and I just thought just not just the way you played, but just dynamically for the room, it was like absolutely perfect. And do you think about the dynamics when you're depending on the room you're playing in, or is it something that's at this point more of an automatic thing? Like if you're playing in somewhere bigger, you might be able like is it something that you consciously think about at this point?
Well, every room is completely different. I
Right.
mean, Mesro for me personally, I don't know if all the drummers that play in there would agree, but I find it more challenging because it's such a live room back there. The drums are situated right in front of a mirror, and it's nothing but hard surfaces. Versus a place like Smalls that has a little bit more absorption in the floor. They well, of course, they have a new stage now, and that's changed everything. Just the shape of the room, everything is different.
I
But
was like 6 feet from you and I was like, this is fine, like this is not
yeah,
no problem
so
sitting by the drums.
yeah, so like in that room with that trio, of course, we've played a lot together. My number one response is to play underneath the bass. I want to, like I have a little mixing console, and I want to keep the drums just underneath the bass, unless there's a time where I need to punch a little bit here and there. But developing a touch, that's something that I used to work with my students on quite a bit, and uh, don't just play uh, coordination drills or whatever, but practice them with the touch that you would play as if you were playing on the stage. And that's sometimes not as easy to do, in modern educational facilities. A lot of times you'll have a drum studio, and it'll have a big powerhouse speaker so you can put on a record and play along with it. And I would say, no, don't ever do that. You just turn it down almost to where the volume of your phone, and just try to play along at that soft volume, and still keep the intensity up. That's something that I think a lot of musicians particularly drummers struggle with, is keeping intensity up when the volume is really low. They tend to, when they play soft, sound timid. And I want to have that edge and that bite and that forward motion and drive to my playing, but still keeping it at a fraction of the volume.
This is so great. Like this is like well, everything you just said there was just so insightful for drummers. It would change a lot for people. So no, I want to say thanks for, speaking with me for a little bit today. And, for any New York people who need a vacation, please go to Kentucky to,
There you go.
to take in what Jason Tiemann has. So
There you go.
yeah, no, really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, man. It's great talking.